I've always believed that the truth has a way of coming out eventually. You can bury it, you can fight to keep it hidden, you can throw up every legal barrier imaginable, but eventually the truth surfaces. And today, that's exactly what happened with Donald Trump. A federal judge has unsealed recorded phone calls that Trump and his legal team have been fighting desperately to keep buried for over a year. And let me tell you, now that I've listened to these recordings, I understand exactly why Trump wanted them to stay secret. These calls are absolutely devastating. They're proof positive of criminal conduct, of conspiracy, of obstruction of justice. Trump faces serious jail time because of what's on these tapes, and there's simply no way to spin them or explain them away. Let me start by explaining how we got here, because the backstory is important. These recordings were obtained by federal investigators over a year ago as part of their investigation into Trump's efforts to obstruct justice and intimidate witnesses. Trump's lawyers immediately filed motions to keep the recordings sealed, arguing attorney-client privilege, executive privilege, and every other privilege they could think of. They claimed that releasing these recordings would violate Trump's rights, would prejudice potential jurors, would cause irreparable harm. Judge Sarah Netburn in the Southern District of New York has been weighing these arguments for months, carefully reviewing the recordings in camera, considering the legal issues. And today she issued her ruling. The recordings will be unsealed and made public because the evidence of criminal conduct on those tapes overrides any privilege claims Trump might have. I've now listened to several of these recordings, and they're even worse than what was described in court filings. We're talking about Trump explicitly discussing how to hide evidence from investigators. We're talking about him strategizing with associates about how to intimidate witnesses into changing their testimony. We're talking about him acknowledging that what he's doing is illegal, but proceeding anyway. These aren't ambiguous conversations that could be interpreted multiple ways. These are crystal clear recordings of Trump engaging in criminal conspiracy. One of the most damning recordings is a phone call between Trump and one of his attorneys discussing documents that had been subpoenaed by federal investigators. On this call, Trump is clearly heard instructing his lawyer to make certain documents disappear. He doesn't use euphemisms. He doesn't speak in code. He literally says that specific documents need to disappear before investigators can get their hands on them. His lawyer, to their credit, tries to push back, tries to explain that destroying subpoenaed documents is obstruction of justice. In Trump's response, he says, and I quote, "I don't care what it's called, just make it happen." That's direct evidence of obstruction. That's Trump explicitly ordering the destruction of evidence. Another recording that's absolutely explosive involves Trump speaking with a witness who was scheduled to testify before a grand jury. Trump is heard offering this witness financial assistance, promising to cover their legal fees, suggesting that there might be opportunities for them down the road if they do the right thing. And when the witness asks what the right thing means, Trump makes it clear, stick to the story we agreed on, don't volunteer information, and if you don't remember something, just say you don't remember. That's witness tampering. That's Trump coaching a witness on how to commit perjury and offering them bribes to do it. I've been involved in politics for over 5 decades. I've been investigated. I've been deposed. I've testified under oath. But I never, not once, engaged in the kind of blatant criminal conduct that's documented on these recordings. And the fact that Trump did all of this while knowing he was potentially being recorded shows an astounding level of arrogance and stupidity. He genuinely believed he was untouchable, that he could break the law openly and face no consequences. The judge's decision to unseal these recordings came with a lengthy written opinion that's worth examining. Judge Netburn systematically dismantled every argument Trump's legal team made for keeping the recording sealed. On attorney-client privilege, she noted that the crime-fraud exception applies when communications between lawyer and client are in furtherance of a crime. Since the recording showed Trump instructing his lawyers to help him commit crimes, privilege doesn't apply. On executive privilege, she noted that Trump is no longer president and that executive privilege has never protected criminal conduct anyway, on the claim that releasing the recordings would prejudice potential jurors. She noted that the public's right to know about potential criminal conduct by a former president outweighs any prejudice concerns. Trump's reaction to the unsealing has been predictable. He immediately went on Truth Social and started claiming that the recordings are fake, that they've been doctored, that this is all part of a conspiracy to prevent him from running for president. But here's the problem with that defense. These recordings have been authenticated by multiple forensic experts. The metadata has been verified. Voice analysis confirms it's Trump speaking. Chain of custody has been established. These are real recordings of real conversations, and no amount of denial is going to change that. The political implications of these recordings being made public are enormous. But now the American people can listen to these recordings themselves. They can hear Trump in his own words, ordering the destruction of evidence, tampering with witnesses, acknowledging that what he's doing is illegal. How do you maintain a persecution narrative when people can hear you committing crimes? I've been talking to prosecutors and legal experts about what these recordings mean for Trump's criminal exposure, and the consensus is that he's in very serious trouble. The recordings provide direct evidence of multiple crimes: obstruction of justice, witness tampering, conspiracy, destruction of evidence. These aren't crimes that require complicated legal theories or interpretations. These are straightforward violations of federal criminal law, and the evidence is literally Trump's own voice on tape. One recording that particularly stands out involves Trump discussing his knowledge of classified documents that he retained after leaving office. Investigators have been trying to determine whether Trump knowingly took classified materials or whether it was an oversight that he then compounded by refusing to return them. Well, this recording answers that question definitively. Trump is heard discussing specific classified documents, acknowledging that they're classified and explaining to an associate why he wanted to keep them. He talks about how these documents could be useful to him, how they contain information that could protect him or hurt his enemies. This isn't someone who accidentally packed the wrong boxes. This is someone who deliberately retained classified information for his own purposes. The recordings also reveal the extent of Trump's obstruction efforts. We knew from court filings that Trump had attempted to obstruct the various investigations into his conduct, but these recordings show just how systematic and deliberate those efforts were. Hess heard on multiple calls discussing strategies for hiding evidence, for delaying investigations, for discrediting witnesses. He talks about having people looked into, about finding dirt on prosecutors and investigators. This is a man who viewed the entire justice system as an enemy to be defeated rather than a process to be respected. Judge Netburn's opinion unsealing these recordings also addresses something important. She notes that Trump's pattern of obstruction and witness tampering has continued even after he left office. These aren't just historical recordings from his time as president. Some of these calls were made in 2024 and 2025, after he had already been indicted, after he was already under multiple investigations. Trump was actively committing new crimes, even while being prosecuted for old ones. That shows a complete inability to learn, a fundamental disregard for the law, and a personality that simply cannot accept that rules apply to him. I want to talk about one recording in particular that shows Trump's mindset about the rule of law. In a call with one of his political advisors, Trump is discussing the various investigations he's facing. And he says something that I think reveals everything about how he views the world. He says, laws are for people who can't afford good lawyers. Think about that statement. This is a man who genuinely believes that the legal system is just a game, that justice is something you can buy your way out of if you have enough money and enough lawyers willing to bend the rules. That's not an American value. That's oligarchy. That's corruption. The recordings also include conversations that are going to be particularly damaging to some of Trump's associates and enablers. There are multiple people on these calls who are heard participating in or endorsing Trump's criminal schemes. Some of them are lawyers who should have known better. Some of them are political advisors who apparently had no ethical boundaries. All of them now face potential criminal liability based on what's captured in these recordings. And I suspect some of them are going to be very motivated to cooperate with prosecutors now that the recordings are public. Trump's legal team has already filed an emergency appeal trying to get the recordings sealed again, but I don't think they're going to succeed. Judge Netburn's opinion is thorough and well-reasoned. She clearly anticipated the appeal and structured her opinion to withstand appellate review. The recordings are out there now, the public has heard them, and you can't unring that bell. I've been watching the reaction from Republicans in Congress, and it's fascinating. Most of them are staying quiet, refusing to comment on the recordings. A few of the more shameless ones are still defending Trump, claiming the recordings are taken out of context or don't prove anything. But there are cracks forming. Some Republicans are privately saying they can't defend this anymore, that Trump on tape ordering the destruction. Evidence is a bridge too far. Whether that private concern translates into public action remains to be seen, but the recordings have definitely created problems for Republicans who've tied their political fortunes to Trump. The recordings also reveal Trump's relationships with various foreign entities, and some of those revelations are deeply concerning from a national security perspective. There is one call where Trump is discussing classified information with someone who clearly shouldn't have access to it, apparently trying to impress them or curry favor. There is another call where he is discussing potential business deals in a foreign country, while also discussing policy decisions that would affect that country. The conflicts of interest, the potential for corruption, the utter disregard for national security protocols, it's all right there on tape. One aspect of these recordings that's particularly damning is how they corroborate testimony that Trump's defenders have been dismissing as unreliable. Multiple witnesses in various investigations have testified about Trump's obstruction efforts, his witness tampering, his instructions to destroy evidence. Trump's team has attacked all of these witnesses as liars, as disgruntled former employees, as people with axes to grind. But now we have recordings that confirm exactly what these witnesses have been saying. The recordings validate their testimony and destroy Trump's defense that everyone who's accused him is lying. Let me address something that Trump's defenders are already claiming, that these recordings were obtained illegally, that they violate his privacy rights, that they shouldn't be admissible. That's nonsense. These recordings were obtained pursuant to valid court orders as part of legitimate criminal investigations. Some of them were made by people who were cooperating investigators and who consented to having their calls recorded. Others were obtained through lawful wiretaps authorized by federal judges who found probable cause that crimes were being committed. Trump has no reasonable expectation of privacy when he is committing crimes on the phone. I've been thinking about what it means that we now live in a country where we have recordings of a former president committing crimes. This isn't like Watergate, where we had recordings of Nixon discussing crimes in abstract terms, using euphemisms, maintaining some level of deniability. These Trump recordings are explicit. They're unambiguous. They're recordings of criminal conduct happening in real time. And that's both horrifying and, in a strange way, clarifying. We don't have to wonder whether Trump committed these crimes. We can hear him doing it. The recordings are also to be crucial evidence at Trump's various trials. Prosecutors no longer have to rely solely on witness testimony, which defense attorneys can attack as unreliable or biased. They have Trump's own words in his own voice, captured on recordings that have been authenticated by experts. That's the kind of evidence that wins cases. That's the kind of evidence that results in convictions. Trump is now facing the very real possibility of significant prison time based on these recordings. Obstruction of justice alone carries a potential sentence of up to 20 years. Witness tampering carries up to 20 years. Destruction of evidence, conspiracy, mishandling of classified information, all of these crimes have serious potential sentences. And when you have someone who's committed multiple crimes, who's shown no remorse, who's continued to commit crimes even while under investigation, judges tend not to be lenient. I want to talk about what these recordings reveal about Trump's state of mind and his fitness to hold office. The man on these recordings is not someone who's fit to be president. He is someone who views laws as obstacles to be circumvented, who sees the justice system as an enemy to be defeated, who's willing to obstruct investigations and tamper with witnesses to protect himself. That's not leadership. That's criminality. And the fact that he wants to be president again, despite everything on these recordings, shows a level of narcissism and entitlement that's genuinely dangerous. The media coverage of these recordings has been intense and will continue for weeks. News outlets are going to be playing excerpts constantly, analyzing every word, bringing in experts to explain the legal implications. Trump can't escape this. He can't change the subject. His voice is on these recordings committing crimes, and the entire country is going to hear it over and over again. I've also been thinking about the people who enabled Trump, the lawyers and advisors and political operatives who participated in these schemes. Some of them are on these recordings actively helping Trump obstruct justice and tamper with witnesses. They face criminal liability too, and I hope prosecutors go after them aggressively because holding enablers accountable is crucial to preventing future abuses of power. The unsealing of these recordings is also going to have an impact on Trump's civil cases. He is facing multiple civil lawsuits from people who claim he defamed them, defrauded them, or otherwise harmed them. Recordings where Trump discusses his dishonesty, his willingness to lie, his strategies for avoiding accountability, all of that is going to be relevant in those civil cases and is going to make it much harder for him to prevail. There's also a recording that reveals Trump's awareness of potential tax fraud. In a conversation with his longtime accountant, Trump is heard discussing valuations of his properties and explicitly acknowledging that they are inflating values for loan purposes and deflating them for tax purposes. He actually laughs about it on the call, joking about how the banks and the IRS will never figure it out. Well, they figured it out, and now there's a recording of Trump admitting to the scheme. That's going to be Exhibit A in additional prosecutions. Another particularly disturbing recording involves Trump discussing a federal judge who was overseeing one of his cases. Trump is heard suggesting that they should look into the judge's background, find out if there's anything we can use against them. When his associate asks what he means by use, Trump talks about potentially making the information public to pressure the judge or discredit their rulings. That's an attempt to intimidate a federal judge, which is yet another federal crime. The recordings also capture Trump's view of his own supporters. In one call, he's discussing his fundraising operation with a political consultant. Trump actually says that his supporters are easy marks who will believe anything he tells them. He talks about how he can raise money by claiming persecution, and his supporters will open their wallets every time. It's a deeply cynical view of the people who've been most loyal to him, and it shows that Trump views his political movement as nothing more than a money-making opportunity. What's particularly striking about these recordings is Trump's tone. He doesn't sound worried or conflicted about what he's doing. He sounds confident, even gleeful at times. He's clearly enjoying the game of trying to outsmart investigators, trying to manipulate the system, trying to avoid accountability. There's no sense of shame or concern about the illegality of his actions. It's all just a challenge to be overcome, rules to be broken, people to be manipulated. The legal community's reaction to these recordings has been near universal condemnation. The American Bar Association has issued a statement expressing concern about the lawyers who participated in these conversations and didn't report Trump's illegal requests as they were ethically obligated to do. Several state bar associations are opening investigations into Trump's lawyers based on what's captured on these recordings. Some of these lawyers may lose their licenses to practice law. Looking ahead, I think these recordings mark a turning point in Trump's legal troubles. Before today, he could claim everything was just allegations, witness testimony that might be unreliable, documents that could be interpreted different ways. But you can't misinterpret your own voice on tape ordering someone to destroy evidence. You can't claim witness testimony is unreliable when there are recordings that confirm exactly what the witnesses said. Trump is cornered, and these recordings are the evidence that cornered him. The Justice Department has already announced that they're reviewing the recordings to determine if additional charges should be brought based on what they reveal. Given that some of these recordings document crimes that weren't part of existing indictments, it's very likely that Trump will face additional charges. Each new charge increases the potential prison time he is facing and makes it harder for him to avoid conviction. I've been asked whether I think Trump will try to flee the country now that these recordings are public and his legal situation is so dire. Honestly, I don't think so. Trump's ego won't allow him to run. He genuinely believes he can talk his way out of anything, that he can convince people that what they're hearing on the recordings isn't what they think they're hearing. He's going to fight this all the way, even though fighting is only making things worse for him. The historical significance of these recordings cannot be overstated. Future generations are going to study these as examples of how political power can corrupt, how individuals can abuse the trust placed in them, and how important it is to have systems of accountability that can't be manipulated by the powerful. These recordings are going to be played in classrooms, analyzed in textbooks, cited in legal opinions. They're Trump's legacy, captured in his own voice for all time. For years, Trump has gotten away with behavior that would have destroyed anyone else's political career or business empire. Has lied, has cheated, has broken laws, and has always managed to avoid serious consequences. He has convinced himself and his supporters that he is untouchable, that the rules don't apply to him, that he can get away with anything. But these recordings prove that's not true. The truth has caught up with him. His own words have condemned him, and now he is going to face the consequences that he has managed to avoid for so long.